Welcome back to the Flying Cow Podcast, where we explore the stories and people that make Wellington a truly exceptional hometown. I'm your host, Jim Barnes, Wellington's village manager, and today we're talking hurricane season, what it means for Wellington, how we prepare as a village, and what every resident should do to stay safe. Today I'd like to welcome Nicole Coates, Wellington's emergency manager, and really her official title is Wellington's Public Safety and Emergency Management Director. But Nicole's been with Wellington a while and has a little bit of history. So Nicole, well, first of all, welcome, and give us a little bit of background and how you've spent your time here in Wellington over the last many years.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, for having me here. I started in the village in 2001, started in the Parks and Recreation Department. There we moved on to signature events. We would do incident command structure. I coordinated a lot of the big events here in the village with fire rescue, law enforcement, and kind of developed that relationship. And we used a system called incident command structure to coordinate these events, which ties right into FEMA. That's a FEMA training. And from there, I worked with John Bondi, who at the time was the deputy village manager, who coordinated and assisted with all of these large-scale disasters. So working under him, kind of shadowed him, and that's how I graduated here to emergency management.
That's great. Yeah, it's actually important to note that in addition to the type of work that you have to do, the village as a whole has to do during emergencies, we actually function in an emergency structure for many of our large-scale events using the incident command structure you noted. And so you've been doing what in essence is what we're doing for emergency management many years before you were actually in the emergency management and public safety business. But that's great, and it's I think very helpful to have somebody that has the institutional knowledge and history that you have with Wellington handling us and taking the charge and the helm during emergencies. So focusing now on looking at actually hurricane season, what does that mean for us? How about maybe you give us some information, what can we look at and expect as an outlook for this hurricane season, and tell us what some of the experts out there are forecasting for this year's hurricane season.
Yeah, so the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which we call NOAA, they're predicting an above-average season, so 60% we can experience 13 to 19 named storms, and that's winds over 39 miles per hour. Of that, 6 to 10 hurricanes with winds over 74 miles per hour. And of those hurricanes, 3 to 5 major hurricanes, that's Category 3 and above, winds of over 111 miles per hour. And for those newer residents listening, hurricane season runs June 1st through November 30th.
That's great, and that's a pretty intense storm prediction given that you're looking at 13 to 19 named storms alone, and of that you've got 6 to 10 that are hurricanes, forgetting even that we're looking at potentially 3 to 5 major storms. We've been fortunate on this side of the state, particularly in our area in Palm Beach County, to not have had really a true direct hit in a very long time. So how, comparing, looking at the more recent years where there have been active hurricane seasons as well, how does this upcoming season's forecast compare?
So yeah, Jim, you're right. And this season, it's looking just like 2024, last year's season, which actually was spot on. That outlook was 18 named storms, 11 hurricanes, and 5 major hurricanes. So we're looking pretty comparable to last year.
Okay. So breaking it down, while I know some of the predictions, are statewide, South Florida in general, and even in some cases countywide, what does that really mean for us here in Wellington specifically, just looking within, what do we need to do and what should we think about?
Yeah, so these weather forecasters talk a lot about the cone of uncertainty, which really speaks to where the center of the storm may go. And so regardless of those predictions, we need to not focus on where the center is, because the impacts of these storms are felt well beyond that center line, and you'll see in that cone of uncertainty that white shaded area. I mean, that's where the storm may fall, but those impacts go well beyond that. So I think regardless of the uncertainty of these storms, we really just need to have a preparedness mindset, and that Wellington is an inland community. So you'll hear a lot of forecasters and news anchors talk about the coastal surge and issues like that. We don't really experience that here in the village of Wellington. So we really just need to focus on what the hazards are in our community, which could be high wind speeds, causing down power lines, blocked roads. We could have flooding rain, depending on how heavy the rainfall is, and that can happen well after a storm passes our area, as we know with Tropical Storm Isaac. And also dealing with tornadoes. So tornadoes, as we know, we have that experience here in the village of Wellington. Know and have a plan for that. Know to go into an interior room, and know that that's possible in these storms.
That's a lot of information to try and be able to prepare for, certainly, and it's certainly tougher for folks that have only recently moved into our area, and in particular moved to the state, who may not have experienced hurricanes or those kinds of storms before. But let's take a minute. You mentioned tornadoes as a possible effect of being in a hurricane season and being hit by hurricanes. You have the tornadic activity that comes with that. We did have a major tornado go through the village and affect the village last season. Let's talk a little bit about that and give us a little bit background and history and information just from last year when we were hit with that tornado. That was, I think, part of one of the last hurricanes in the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so tornadoes are likely in these storms, but the one that we had last year, it was historic. An EF3 tornado is not a common occurrence here, especially not in the village of Wellington. That's kind of in comparison to like a Midwest tornado. But with Milton's landfall, which happened north of us, it just caused the perfect conditions to have these outer bands produce these really strong storms. Actually, in fact, historic enough where it broke a state record. There was 46 confirmed tornadoes in the state of Florida. And it was just something that started in that kind of south end of the village of Wellington, traveled 21 miles north, hit areas above us. It was 300 feet wide. It was really a monster storm.
Yeah, it seemed to really devastate the areas that it did impact. It's always interesting when you look at the path of these tornadoes and the resulting damage that happens. How surgical it can be, and where it goes through properties, and some properties next door have no damage or very little damage, whereas then adjacent properties are totally devastated. And it's something, as you mentioned, the EF3, and in some cases it took a while to even come up with that calculation after looking at wind speed and duration and that type of thing. That's something, unless you are from the Midwest or other areas that are more tornado prone, we don't see that here. We certainly get tornadoes in South Florida and in Wellington and Palm Beach County, but nothing like that. Talk a little bit, and I know it's a tough discussion to have, because some folks really just barely. We were fortunate, as a note, that we were fortunate not to have any fatalities, but we did have a considerable amount of damage. But talk a little bit about the tornado warning systems that are in place, and how we kind of had a little bit of a different situation, at least in our area and maybe throughout the rest of the county, where some folks got that and some folks didn't.
Yeah, so we actually worked with the National Weather Service. We work closely with them. They are the official agency that issues these tornado warnings, and it was confirmed that they were sent. Now, whether people receive them or not has a lot of variables tied into that, whether they turned off notifications, whether because of the magnitude of this and the magnitude of the quantity of alerts that were sent could have jammed up the cell system. But what we do know, and what the message is from National Weather Service, is have multiple ways of getting your alerts.
That's a good point, because I think most everybody, certainly speaking for myself, I just have the regular alerts that would come automatically through your cell carrier. But I guess having talked to people since then, and also the questions we received and the research we had to do, I guess there are other apps that send out alerts, and some folks receive those alerts, but not the Weather Service general alert that comes through the cell service. So I guess the key takeaway is have some redundancy as far as being able to take, get the information. And ultimately, I think definitely after last year's tornado that we went through here, more and more people, myself included, are going to pay more attention to those warnings as opposed to just ignoring it and silencing my phone.
Right.
Well, with that and how the impact that we had at EF3, what's the give us a little background and summary of the actual what kind of impacts did we see in Wellington?
Yeah, so and I just want you to know, and everybody listening, that we do know that there are still residents 8 months after the tornado that are working through their insurance claims and getting their necessary repairs done. So We do know that it takes time when you get an impact like this to your home and to our community, but we experienced here in the village about 229 homes that sustained some type of damage, whether from completely leveled home we saw here to some of the, I would say, hardest hit homes. About half of that, 107-ish, experienced a lot of roof damage, a lot of pool structures collapsed. Some of the homes that had the cars flipped, they lost their cars on top of broken trusses to the roof. So that was definitely something that we've not seen before here in the village. Even too, it's amazing to see a tree going perpendicular into a concrete block structure, or I should say horizontally into the structure on the side of the home. So a lot of stuff like that, some exterior wall damage.
I think for sure, having been in Wellington and worked in Wellington since the early 2000s and having had different storms, the tornado damage that we saw post tornado here in Wellington exceeded what some of the damage that we saw in some of the strongest hurricanes. So there's definitely a different component to that high wind and the issues that come with a tornado. And I think for sure we were not necessarily prepared for what we were seeing. Mm-hmm. As far as that goes, one of the key things that we pride ourselves on here is our ability to be able to respond and serve the residents in any situation, particularly in emergency situations where they are at their most vulnerable. How did our teams respond for that emergency event?
I think we have some of the best and experienced emergency management trained staff. They've been through so many storms. And they know exactly what to do. So when the tornado hit on October 9th, we had crews here, and they immediately went to the impacted areas. Within minutes, we had our public works department on scene clearing roadways of downed trees. Their chainsaws were working. We had heavy equipment making sure we can make way for our first responders. And shout out to the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office and Palm Beach County Fire Rescue. Their response was amazing. They provided immediately following the tornado, they went door to door checking on residents, whether their house is impacted or not in these areas. And we heard it from residents saying how comforting it was to know after such a violent occurrence that you're just not used to. They're still assessing what actually just happened. To see fire rescue and law enforcement there and Village of Wellington staff, it really showed that we know what we're doing and we can get through this together.
That's great, and you're right. I mean, I think we had a lot of comments throughout the recovery period that folks noted that while they were somewhat shell-shocked after the extensive damage right after the tornado, the fact that at least minimally what we could do to try and make roads passable, to at least safe up locations. And were we able to address everything? Probably not, and that's expected. But they were somewhat comforted by seeing the response. Now you did appropriately note the great service and team effort that we have with Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office as well as Palm Beach County Fire Rescue and our own forces. Talk a little bit about the community partners and how they really played a role this time, more so than they probably have in the past, given that the damage was so extensive and the impacts were so devastating.
Yeah, we after that storm made landfall, or I should say the tornado hit our area, we just had an outpouring of people who wanted to help. They were contacting our elected officials, all different ways, and we had over 200 volunteers from a variety of organizations, faith-based, community partners we work with year-round, all wanting to step up and help. And it was really a great neighbors helping neighbors, which is kind of a theme with emergency management too, is to check on your neighbors. And we saw that here in the village. And again, residents who had these volunteers come to their home, they really appreciated just knowing that someone cared. So yeah, we have great community partners that showed up.
That's great, and it again, kind of bringing back together. It does take a village, and this time everybody stepped up, and special thanks to all those community volunteers, community partners, residents, and neighbors that really were there to help their neighbors. So that's great. taken away from that particular event as far as the other events that you've been involved with, what lessons did we learn, and have you learned, and what are we going to be able to apply, on how we plan going forward?
I think it's really important that we don't focus on the storm's landfall, and Hurricane Milton was the great example of that. Hurricane Milton made landfall near Siesta Key, which is just south of Tampa area. And to put that in miles, it's about 178 miles north of the village of Wellington. So roughly 3.5 hour drive. Think, okay, this is where it's going. We're good. We're in the clear. But obviously that's not the case. There's real hazards, and we said that are widespread beyond the cone. So we just need to stay in a preparedness mindset and, be prepared, not scared, I'd like to say.
That's a good way to think about it, and I think certainly preparing as early as possible is important. So take us through, one of the things, again, as a community and as a local government, given that we have to remain operational before, during, and after the emergency event, in this case the storm event. How do we prepare? And give the folks out there some idea of how we prepare for hurricane season, and in particular, a storm.
Yeah, so Wellington prepares year-round. We've established emergency contracts such as debris contractors, mutual aid agreements. We work with our gated communities because we have to have right of entry agreements if we need to get emergency contractors in those communities, which we did and we do. Our surface water team works throughout the year to make sure our stormwater drains are clear, that they're operable, they're free of obstruction. Our pump stations are prepared. Generators are tested monthly. We maintain great relationships, like you were saying, Jim, with community partners, but also our emergency partners, like Palm Beach County Emergency Management. Communication is extremely important. And about, I want to say 2 years ago, we started to use the Starlinks. We were testing out the Starlinks, and this year, we actually are putting Starlinks out at every one of our critical facilities, which is going to help us maintain internet, which I think is fantastic. I think it's innovative and ahead of probably what a lot of agencies are doing. But that's how we're going to stay in touch and be able to recover the village quickly and safely. Also, so that's kind of year round. We're working on these things, and then so when a storm is approaching, we go into like an enhanced monitoring state. And we may partially or fully activate our EOC. That's when we start our daily briefings with the county partners, the National Weather Service. We're really paying a close attention to what's going on. We'll pre-position resources throughout the village, such as deploying these generators to the lift stations so our collection lines, they can continue to flow to the solid waste department.
In terms maybe of, so when you're looking at pre-storm preparation, and then when you mentioned that we're in enhanced monitoring mode as either the storm approaches, that cone of uncertainty narrows a little bit, and maybe we can better define, okay, we can expect landfall at a certain time frame, and we can expect landfall within a certain area. What else do we look at in terms of preparation and operations in terms of our emergency staff going forward, in that window where, let's say, we're, a day to 3 days away from landfall of a storm somewhere in our vicinity?
Yeah, we're looking at our staffing. We're making sure that if, in fact, we are going to get a direct hit, or, again, if we're not going to get a direct hit, what type of staff and who are we having work as our on-site storm team? So they're making those preparations well before potential landfall. They're here overnight. Another thing that people might not know is that we do activate our call center. So that happens prior to and after and during a storm. So you can actually call our 561-791-4000 number, and you can hear a live village representative there. Obviously, if it's an emergency, call 911. But we definitely have the right size staff and scale it to what we're expecting.
Okay. What about in terms of when we're actually preparing for the storm? What departments generally are involved and really key to that storm prep right before the storm hits?
Yeah, we have all staff really gets involved, but I would have to highlight Public Works. They're out there. They're making sure everything is operating. We're also using our utility department. Utilities is there preparing, making sure our critical facilities are working and ready to weather whatever we're expecting. We have our communications team is out there putting out information, reliable sources of information, what residents can know what's happening here in the village, and that's happening.
Well, that's good. And those some of the folks you mentioned, utilities, public works, those are the same folks that are working year round on the infrastructure. What give us a little bit of information that in addition to what we do for storm prep. That those same utilities and public works, the infrastructure teams, what have they done over the course of the year and the prior years as far as our infrastructure to be more resilient?
Yeah, Jim, you've done a great job here. We know that the village has invested a lot in our infrastructure, specifically in hazard mitigation projects, which we have received grant funding for, ranging from roadway to drainage improvements to hardwired generators at our lift stations. Recently, we're going through an improvement at our Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Preserve, which is actually a stormwater impoundment area. We can pump stormwater into that. And we also just recently received a grant from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection that will do a comprehensive vulnerability assessment, which will further identify areas that we can make improvement to make Wellington more resilient.
Those are definitely important improvements, and I think that's been a commitment that our village council currently and all our prior village councils have prioritized, is basically reinvesting in our community, reinvesting in our infrastructure so that we stay resilient and even become more resilient as the environment changes around us. So we're in the early part of hurricane season now. As you mentioned, it goes until November 30th. What should residents be doing now? We're already in the beginning of season. It started. What should be residents doing now to prepare?
I would say right now, any major tree trimming, hopefully that's wrapping up. We don't really want to get more of that done as we get closer to the peak season, which happens around September, but you just don't know. Gathering your supplies, making a plan. There's really four kind of key areas that I would say you would want to focus on is to make a plan right now. That's something we can do. Are you going to go to a shelter? We're not in an evacuation zone, and really a shelter is the last resort. You really, if you're home, you don't want to ride out a storm in there, you'd really want to just maybe stay with a family member. Have a communication plan. What if communication fails? We prepare for that in the village. Make sure your family knows where you're at so they can check on you after. And if you're vulnerable, I think it's important right now what you can do. If you're a vulnerable population, do you have special needs such as dialysis, oxygen? Do you need electricity? Contact the Palm Beach County Special Needs Program, and you must pre-register. That's at 561-712-6400. Building a kit. You could do that right now. They say kind of rule of thumb, 3 to 7 days worth of food, 1 gallon per person per day. And that's really just to sustain you until things can start to resume as normal. And we prepare for the worst, but we're hoping for the best. Go to the Florida Division of Emergency Management page. They have a great checklist there. We also have it on our website too, wellingtonfl.gov/storm. So building a kit and then staying informed. Check out our Village of Wellington pages. And website. We have a lot of good information on there.
Okay, and what can we think about as far as just kind of some lessons learned from that we've seen in our community and what we've seen over the course of your background and training in emergency management as to what any common mistakes residents make that we can help them avoid by reminding them about it here.
So I thought this was funny, but don't wait for Jim Cantore to be on your street. That's waiting to the last minute. And I think that's what people tend to do. You don't want to think of bad things, so you wait till the last minute. But that's the stuff we could be doing right now and helping ourselves become more resilient. Because supplies can run out early. And when you're building your supplies, don't panic about it. You don't need 87 loaves of bread or like COVID, 42 rolls of toilet paper, a practical amount just until the stores are back open. Again, focusing on that line, that cone of uncertainty, don't focus on that. Just be prepared, because you just don't know. And don't have a mindset that it'll never happen here. And we learned that with the EF3 tornado. Is it likely? Yes, and it has happened, but we hope it's unlikely that it's a routine occurrence. But just know that these hazards are real and they can happen. And whether you live in Texas all the way up to Maine, we're all vulnerable for hurricanes.
Okay. Well, as we wrap up and close out this session and this episode of the podcast, how about kind of some key takeaways here? So, how should we stay informed before, during, and after the storm?
Definitely like us on Facebook, on our X account. Go download the Go Wellington and DART apps. And I just want to say too, Jim, you did excellent coverage and reporting during the tornado. That was extremely helpful. So like Jim's Facebook page if you can, as well as our Facebook page. And wellingtonfl.gov/storm. We'll have updates there, preparedness items, and then updates throughout the storm, so you know what's resuming and coming back to normal.
So lastly, final tips and resources. What can you share with us to kind of send us out of here with the best information going in terms of how to make sure that we stay safe this season?
So be proactive, not reactive. Prepare early and stay informed.
That's great. Again, Nicole, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us here. And when I say expertise, it's really not just, you're not only a team member here in Wellington, you're a resident in Wellington, you grew up in Wellington. So I think you bring a different perspective to the position that you hold here, and definitely a different perspective as to how we address these emergencies and storms. It's important that we do that. And also, as well as really looking at the information that we have. Just to reiterate again, one of the information items you pointed out, be sure to go to wellingtonfl.gov/storm for all the hurricane information we have, all the resources that we provide to our residents. Again, just like you reminded everybody, sign up for Alert Wellington and follow Wellington's social channels so that we have real-time updates. We do try and provide that. And ultimately, basically what we want everybody to do is stay safe this hurricane season, be prepared, make a plan, and keep checking in with the village as far as what we're recommending should a storm get close, should an emergency situation get close. We will try and keep communication open and keep everybody informed. Again, thanks everybody for listening at this episode of the Flying Cow Podcast, where community takes flight. And one reminder, stay safe this hurricane season.